Lockdown, lockdown. This is an emergency alert. Please follow lockdown procedures. Go into the nearest room or building, lock the door, and turn off all lights. Wait for the all clear from school officials or local authorities. Lockdown, lockdown.
First and foremost, I want to say that I can't stand bullies, or bullying in general. I don't say all this because I was bullied, or because I saw some anti-bullying PSA. I say it because bullying led to one of the scariest moments of my life. When I was in high school, I was just an average dude, so I just kind of blended in with the rest of the kids. However, that wasn't the case for this guy named Larry. Larry got picked on all the time by everyone, from the mean girls to the jocks, basically everyone at the school. Larry was known as the quiet loner with no friends. He had the look of a typical nerdy shut-in, thick framed glasses, the braces, the hairstyle. Just about everything about him made him an easy target for the bullies. All in all, the guy was harmless, which is why he was easily the most bullied kid in school. Year after year, it only seemed to get worse. I even witnessed an interaction at lunch one day between a couple of seniors and a group of freshmen, where the older kids were basically indoctrinating the freshies into the tradition of picking on Larry. It made me sick to my stomach, and no one really stood up for him because they didn't want to be the next target. But it was around that time that I finally started sticking up for Larry. It severely damaged my reputation, but I didn't care. I could tell it was making life just a little bit easier for Larry, so I kept doing it. I managed to get people to lay off of him in the 2 classes we had together that year, but I knew that people were probably being even nastier when I wasn't around. That's just how vicious my school was at the time. One day, I decided to ditch my friends and sit with Larry during lunch for once. He had sat alone every single day for years, and I wanted to change that. For the next 15 minutes or so, we talked about random things, basically whatever Larry wanted to talk about. It was mostly about his physics homework and comic book stuff, but it felt like I was getting to know him on a basic level that nobody had ever even bothered to do. There was something I wanted to ask him about from the very beginning though. I waited for what seemed like the right moment, but when I mentioned it, he started talking and acting strange as hell.
So, Larry, how's everyone been treating you lately? I'm sick of them. Every last one of them. I see. Well, what if some of them became your friends? Are you my friend? Yeah, of course I am. Friends are supposed to share their secrets with each other, right? Yeah, sure. You promise you won't tell anyone, right? Yeah, I won't tell anyone. Alright. Here, look in my bag.
I only saw it for a second before Larry zipped his bag back up, but it was unmistakable. Larry had possession of a firearm. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My blood ran cold, but I tried to act like it wasn't a huge deal, just so I could ask him the questions I needed to. With every answer, I became more terrified of Larry. He said he was planning to use it soon, not at a range against targets, but at school, on the students, and anyone who tried to get in his way. He said all this while remaining perfectly calm, like he'd been considering it for a long time. I knew this was likely not the first day he had brought it to school either. When the bell finally rang ending the lunch break, I told Larry I'd see him later. That's when I got up and walked away, trying to keep my composure. Our next classes were in opposite directions, so I thankfully didn't have to walk with him. I kept my cool and walked normally until I was around the corner and out of his line of sight. Then I ran like hell to the office. Part of me still felt bad about doing it, but I immediately snitched on Larry, knowing I realistically had no other choice. Not even a minute later, the lockdown alarm was activated. Everybody was still getting out of lunch when the lockdown was called, so I watched it from the office as everyone started screaming and running, trying to find the nearest room to hide in. The cops that arrived shortly after searched the school for Larry, but he was nowhere to be found. It turns out that he ran home as soon as the lockdown started, so there's no doubt in my mind that he already knew I ratted on him. He was later arrested in his house, and since then, I haven't heard or seen Larry since. I don't know how long he spent in juvie or jail, but the district made sure he never came back to the same school he was planning to attack. Seeing the stories on the news about how many students have snapped from all the bullying and done the unthinkable, I believe a lot of people could have gotten hurt if I had not acted. Years have passed since this happened. Everyone graduated and moved on to adulthood, but nobody knows what happened to Larry. To this day, I live with the lingering fear that he will someday come after me to take his revenge. This story was inspired by a horrific incident regarding an 18-year-old man who was arrested and charged after 2 school lockdowns in Regina, where the accused allegedly revealed a firearm to a student. A Regina Police Service school resource officer was notified about the ordeal on Thursday. Police say the male named Chance Larry Constable revealed a firearm to a student, then left. The school was placed into a secure the building lockdown protocol. A police investigation led to a residence on the 1500 block of Bond Street. Police members, including the Special Weapons and Tactics team, surrounded the residence. Because the residence was near an elementary school, it too was also placed on lockdown. At about 3:30 p.m., Constable was arrested by police. The secure building lockdown was lifted at both schools. Police have confirmed that a firearm has not been recovered. Constable has since faced charges.
Lockdown, lockdown. This is an emergency alert. Please follow lockdown procedures. Go into the nearest room or building.
What I'm about to recall happened years ago. I was in high school, though I won't say where I went for my own safety. At the time, I played for the boys' volleyball team. Since practice was after school, it would last until the early evening. By the time we were done, there'd be very few people still in the school aside from the janitors. One day, after we'd finished an intense practice game, we all went into the locker room. Everyone showered, changed, and got ready to go home. Most of the students either walked, drove, or got rides home from other teammates, but I was one of the few people who still had to wait for their mom to pick them up. It always took her forever to get me, so I would usually hang out in the locker room until she texted that she arrived. That day, the locker room was completely empty, except for me. However, at some point, I heard a loud metallic bang coming from somewhere else. It sounded like the exterior door that led out to the track and football field. At first, I hoped it would stop, but when they wouldn't go away, I finally got up and went to check on it. I looked through the glass part of the door and saw a tall man standing outside in a hoodie, seemingly too old to be a student. I knew he could see me, and that's when I heard him shout saying,
"Hey, can you let me in? I'm here to pick up my son."
Unsure of what to say, I replied,
I don't know. Maybe you should enter through the front.
That's far away. Can you please just open the door?
I hesitated, but the guy sounded genuinely distressed, so I didn't want to make his day any worse. I then walked over to the door and pushed it open. The man thanked me and rushed out of the locker room and into the school, apparently looking for his son. That's when I sat back down on the bench and proceeded to wait for my mom. Out of nowhere, an alarm came on, and the school was placed on lockdown. Seconds later, I heard screaming coming from the school. Panicking, I rushed to turn off the lights, but since there was no door to lock to secure the room, I found and hid inside a random locker. All I could hear for a while was the screaming, but then I heard the footsteps as someone rushed into the locker room. I peered through the slits in the metal, trying to see who it was. I couldn't see them, but figured it had to be another student hiding in one of the lockers as well, from the sounds of it. Moments later, someone else ran into the room. However, this time, I knew exactly who it was. It was the man I had let through the door. He still had his hood up, but now he was wearing a mask, and he had a giant machete in his hand that was dripping with blood. That's when I knew I had screwed up. He then ran up in between the 2 rows of lockers that I and another student were in. Suddenly, he started screaming and slashing random lockers all around him. I must have flinched, rattling my locker door the slightest bit, because he turned his head and locked onto me. I held my breath as he walked up to my locker and stared through the same slits I was looking through. I tried as hard as I could not to move while holding the door closed for dear life. Then he screamed and slashed the locker.
I know you're in there. Come out so I can cut your head off. Stop, you got the wrong guy. Bullshit, you're dead.
The machete cut through the door, getting just inches from me. I was staring face to face with the blade as he struggled to get it out. He was just going to try and skewer me inside the locker. But if I opened the door and tried to prove I wasn't the guy he was after, I knew he would just blindly attack me before realizing it. I thought for sure there was no way out, but then I heard it. We both heard it. The sirens. They were still far away but rapidly getting closer. He knew he didn't have time, so he bolted immediately through the same door I let him in through. I stood there, frozen in fear. Then a minute later, the student hiding in the other locker stumbled out and ran off in the other direction toward the school, covered in blood. I stayed hidden until the cops came searching the locker room. I told them everything, hoping it would help, but unfortunately, the investigation never amounted to anything. Neither the masked man or student was able to be identified despite the information I gave. Years have passed, and I still remember this traumatic day like it was yesterday. I don't know if that guy was trying to kill the other one because they were in rival gangs or something, or if he was just some bloodthirsty psycho. Either way, knowing he's still out there makes me sick. I feel incredibly stupid and guilty for opening that door for him, as I know I probably could have prevented the attack altogether had I left him out there. I just know things could have been a lot worse if he had a firearm instead of a machete. Things could have gone so much worse. This story was inspired by a disturbing school lockdown incident regarding a student who was injured after a masked suspect was reportedly seen carrying a machete in a Toronto neighborhood on a Monday afternoon. Toronto police say they were initially called to the area around 3:30 p.m. Paramedics say that one victim was taken to the hospital with serious, but not life-threatening injuries. It is not immediately clear how those injuries were sustained. Officers say a second victim has not been located. The school was placed on lockdown, but at around 5 p.m., it was lifted. The school said several staff and students had already left the school beforehand. However, for those who were in the building, the lockdown procedure included locking all exterior room doors and keeping students and staff inside their classrooms and other secured areas. Police say the suspect is approximately 5'4", with a thin build and black dreads. He was last seen wearing all black clothing, a black toque, white gloves, a white horror movie mask, a white backpack, and white running shoes with yellow accents. Police say that he was carrying a machete in his right hand. Police are asking people to stay out of the area as officers investigate.
Lockdown, lockdown. This is an emergency alert. Please follow lockdown procedures. Go into the nearest room or building.
This happened at my school right after spring break. Nobody was happy about being back. Unlike everyone else, I had 7 classes every day. However, on the first day back, my stomach wasn't feeling the best from all the junk food I ate over the break. So after lunch, I got to my class and notified my teacher that I was going to use the washroom. I made sure to use the washroom downstairs as it was usually emptier. Plus, it wasn't used as often as the top floor one, so it was best whenever someone wanted to take a dump without being noticed. Thankfully, when I got there, nobody was camping outside of it. So I hurried into the first stall, dropped my pants, and nearly didn't even make it to the toilet seat before liquid shit started spraying out of my ass. There was a good 15 seconds of nothing but sputtering and groaning, so I was glad nobody was in the other stalls. Once it was over, I started cleaning myself up. While I was doing that, I noticed some writing on the washroom stall. It said, "Do not come to school on 3/23. That was in 2 days. It felt eerie because of everything that had been happening in schools lately, with kids snapping and doing the unthinkable. When I came out of the stall, I poked my head into the other ones to see if it was part of some other bunch of graffiti that had happened in the washroom, but that seemed to be the only thing written in there. I didn't have time to think much more about it, as I had to rush back upstairs to my class before anyone got too suspicious. The next day, though, the exact same thing happened at the start of 6th period. Mr. Brown, I need to go to the washroom." "Again? Please, it's an emergency." "Be respectful, everyone. You can go, but if this is gonna keep happening, you should probably stay at home." "Yeah. Ow. I wonder who laced his lunch with laxatives." It felt just as urgent in the classroom, so I had to go all the way down to the first floor to do my business. I then got in, and just as I was about to enter a stall, I went to the one I went to the day before to see if the writing was still there, but it was gone, probably cleaned up by the janitor overnight. This time, I went all the way down to the big stall so I wouldn't feel as cramped. I locked the door, sat down, got ready to go. Then, all of a sudden, the lights shut off. It got dark as hell in an instant. That's when I heard someone coming into the washroom just before the lights went out, and the footsteps slowly walking over the tile. I was freaked out, knowing there couldn't be a good reason for someone to enter a washroom after turning off the lights. I had no clue if they knew I was in there, so I kept quiet. I listened to them go into the stall. Then, I heard what sounded like them popping the cap off a marker, followed by writing. Once the writing stopped, I could hear them get out of the stall, then leave the washroom. I didn't like having to do it in the dark, though, so I used my phone flashlight to see what was happening. I finished up, then I left the stall and turned the lights back on. This time I didn't go back to class right away. I stopped to check all the stalls for whatever that person had written. I found it in the very same stall that had the message the day before. There was a new message. It said, "I'm going to blank up the school." My heart almost stopped. I didn't want to be a rat, but I decided I had to report it just to save lives in the worst case scenario. I went straight to the front office and told them what I saw. I didn't think they'd lock down the whole school, but they did. I was losing my mind in the office, thinking non-stop whether I'd made the right decision or ruined some kid's life for no reason. There were cops swarming all over the school, and the lockdown lasted for hours. They even told their parents about it. Eventually, the cops checked everywhere, interrogated me, and made their report declaring the school safe. However, I was still terrified the entire next day, because the first message had said the attack would happen on 3/23, which was that Wednesday. There were cops guarding the school because of it, but nothing ever happened, though the identity of the person who made the threats was never discovered either. To this day, I have no idea if my stomachache saved my school from catastrophe, or if it all was supposed to be a joke that I took too seriously. Maybe if I could have seen the person who wrote it, it would be clearer, but it still freaks me out that they were in the washroom with me, lurking in the dark. Police and high school administration are still searching for the student who wrote a threat on a bathroom wall, causing an entire high school to go into lockdown on March 24. According to police, the threat written was, "Gonna shoot the school per 6B sick ready." Despite the sentence not making total sense grammatically, it is clear what is trying to be conveyed. The threat was found written on the wall of the first-floor boys' bathroom at the high school around 12:30 p.m. Students immediately notified the school administration, who identified the message and notified police, who were on the scene due to an unrelated fire alarm. As a result, the school was put into a controlled lockdown per protocol for about 20 minutes with police present. Parents were notified of the situation via email. The lockdown was lifted after police found the threat to be unfounded and the school was declared safe. School officials said this may have been a copycat incident, with a similar incident that had happened a few days before this one, where several students said they heard someone write in the bathroom, "Do not come to school on 3/23, which translates to March 23rd. The two incidents were eerily similar, but police are unsure if they were necessarily connected. The person that wrote the alleged threats is still unknown.